up, let it roll. Stars and stripes in my soul. Steel toes on, boots in the gravel. Heartland truth on every channel. Open Bible, flag on the wall. We say what we believe or we don't talk it off. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. We back the badge, we guard the border. We love our guns and law and order. They try to shame every word we say, but we don't bow down, we just press play. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the bell. Hey, we won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. You can cancel the show, but not the crowd. We're still here, still talking loud. Hand of the free on every spell. Hit that mic, host, let the truth ring out. This is red, white, and raised hell. Cowboy hat, church bell can't scare us into silence. We were born to rail from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raised hell.
All right, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Wow, we are loaded today. We are loaded for bear. Bernie Moreno is going to be joining us in the second hour, at the top of the hour, 1 hour from now. Senator Moreno has a lot to say about a lot of really important stuff, including yesterday's bombshell and not unexpected Supreme Court ruling, essentially greenlighting the Great Replacement, greenlighting the overtaking of the United States by foreigners who are hostile to the United States of America. That is exactly what the birthright citizenship ruling will do. Obviously, it's in the Constitution. It's the 14th Amendment, but it is being misapplied terribly. Bernie Moreno has a potential solution. He's going to drop a piece of legislation in the Senate that should be appealing to Democrats. Why? Because it was already proposed by Democrats. It's something that should not be difficult to do because Democrats have backed it. One Democrat supported it. In fact, the Democrat majority leader proposed it. I'm going to let Bernie talk about that a little bit coming up at 8 o'clock. Also in the 8 o'clock hour at 8:30, we're going to talk with Donovan O'Neil, who's going to join us to talk about something else that Bernie Moreno is going to be speaking on, and that is the proposal that Senator Moreno has teamed up with Senator Elizabeth Warren, believe it or not, of Massachusetts, to push and promote, which is a way to save Social Security. That's why this was the cover today. Is this the way to save Social Security? One-on-one with Bernie Moreno, but Bernie, like I said, teamed up in this effort of his with Senator Warren to put an op-ed together that promoted this save for Social Security that involves changing of tax rates, payroll tax rates, and something that, according to a lot of tax analysts, saying is going to lead to massive tax spikes for Ohio small businesses. Is this the way? Bernie's taken criticism for the last 4 days like crazy. I asked him, maybe 5 or 6 days. I think this kind of dropped at the end of last week, around Friday, maybe. Anyway, Senator Moreno is here to answer all of the critics and answer all of the tough questions, which is what I'm going to have for him. He knows that. And that'll be at 8 o'clock. Then Donovan O'Neil is going to talk about that because AFP, Americans for Prosperity Ohio, they're sounding the alarm on that proposal that Senator Moreno and Senator Warren teamed up on. So we're going to talk about that. But prior to that, coming up at 7:30, and what would that be, 22 minutes from now, we're going to talk with Andrew Arthur from CIS, the Center for Immigration Studies. What does and what will this ruling yesterday mean? What am I talking about, teeing up the Great Replacement Theory? If you don't understand the Great Replacement Theory, you should, and you will by the time we're done talking about it. But birther tourism just got a massive, massive, massive shot in the arm. An opportunity for nations that are hostile to the United States to take advantage of a birther tourism type of program to set these things up where they do fly pregnant women, very pregnant women, to the United States for vacations or visits or whatever, so that they can stay in the United States long enough to have their baby, then come home, raise their kids potentially in, anti-American type of environments, and then give them unfettered access to the United States because they were born on American soil. That was, of course, the folly of the Supreme Court yesterday in the birthright citizenship ruling. But the idea is that it could be very, very dangerous for the United States going forward. And if this happens thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of times inside of a decade, you're gonna start to see foreign births on U.S. soil outnumber American births on U.S. soil, and that's what the Supreme Court hath wrought in this whole thing. So we have a lot of reactions that we want to get to what happened yesterday. Thank you and welcome into the chatters. I'm going to take a quick peek inside because I think we're going to be very, very busy throughout the morning. Like I said, 3 interviews: Andrew Arthur from CIS, that's the Center for Immigration Studies, then Senator Moreno, then Donovan from AFP. And like I said, we're going to have to tackle all of it. So good morning to the folks that I see jumping in early this morning. Oh, there's that stupid thing. I thought I got rid of that. I guess I did not. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the chat. And within the chat comes the ridiculousness of the Facebook thing. It just keeps posting a comment on repeat that I never actually asked it to post at all. So I'm just trying to fix that real quick. I'm going to make that go away. It shows up in the comments and it bothers me because it shouldn't. Okay. So anyway, well, I'm not able to do that in short order, unfortunately. So I do see Rosebud. Good morning, Rosebud, and B. Morgan, and DB Jones, and Kara Good is in. The regulars are here. The politically incorrect mechanic is in. Lisa is in. Good morning to Jimbo. Good morning to Mike Giro. Good morning to Macromia. Good morning to Sherry. Good morning to Big Jake. Good morning to SRL. Charlie G is up and at it. RH Ron is in. Hockey player Mike is in. Love it. Good morning to all of you guys. Thanks for being here. We have a lot to work on. What are we getting into already here? Lisa says the U.S. Senate can define citizenship. It may change one justice's mind. The Constitution cannot be amended unless they try the Convention of States approach. That's true, and that's not going to happen. Nor do a lot of people feel like it should. I've kind of been of two minds of that for a while, but I have come to realize that we cannot trust the Democrats, and nor can we trust the Republicans, quite frankly, to do what's right by way of a convention of states. So I'm not going to support that at all. All right. Thank you, and good morning to all of those chatters. I want to dive right into this now. Let's put Dylan to work here in the very early going, because there's a lot of audio I want to share between now and 7:30 when our first guest arrives. President Trump is number one. Go ahead and pop up number one, if you would there, Dylan. And President Trump, responding yesterday to the Supreme Court decision on birthright citizenship, which, by the way, President Trump bears a small amount. Can we fix the graphic there, please? There we go. A small amount of blame, because President Trump gave us ACB. President Trump gave us Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett, who I believed was supposed to be conservative, apparently, and when I say conservative, I mean originalist, as a nominee for the Supreme Court. President Trump apparently believed that as well, but his advisors were off, or he was off, or whatever. But Amy Coney Barrett has proven to be more of an asset to the left wing of the Supreme Court than to the conservative wing. When President Trump appointed her, she cast the deciding vote. John Roberts obviously is there as well, but I'm just not surprised by Roberts anymore. The Roberts Court, the Chief Justice, I'm expecting these kind of things from him, but I was not expecting it from Amy Coney Barrett, especially as consistently as we have gotten the wrong verdicts from her in her votes. And Amy Coney Barrett has allowed birther tourism to flourish, and it ensures that it's going to for a long time to come. So President Trump had a really interesting response to the Supreme Court decision yesterday, keyed by John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett siding with the leftists on the court. Here's what President Trump said.
And I'm going.
You're going to go to the Supreme Court
I think
tomorrow?
so. I do believe
And just sit there and listen.
because I have listened to this argument for so long, and this is not about Chinese billionaires or billionaires from other countries who all of a sudden have 75 children or 59 children in one case or 10 children becoming American citizens. This was about slaves. And if you take a look, slaves, we're talking about slaves from the Civil War. And if you take a look at when it was filed, all of this legislation, all of this, everything having to do with birthright citizenship, it was at the end of the Civil War. The reason was it had to do with the babies of slaves and the protection of the babies of slaves. It didn't have to do with the protection of multi-millionaires and billionaires wanting to have their children get an American citizenship. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's been so badly handled by legal people over the years.
That's far enough. So as you can see, the tweet that the truth posting that he did, I would like to congratulate President Xi and the great country of China on their massive birthright citizenship win. President Donald J. Trump. That is about as direct of a slap at the Supreme Court as you will ever see, especially from President Trump. You will never see anything as plain as that. Congratulations, Supreme Court. You just made China great again. Congratulations. You just gave our number one geopolitical rival and enemy in the world. You just gave them some domain over us, because they are going to send scores of Chinese pregnant women to the United States to have their babies here, take them home and raise them under communist China, and then give them full access. They can travel to and from, vote in American elections, run for American office, run for president of the United States. The long game here is what's in play. And President Trump just said technically the Democrats on the court, the 3 Democrat appointees on the court, and 2, even though John Roberts was appointed by George Bush and Amy Coney Barrett by Donald Trump, but 2 largely acting Democrat justices just gave away the long game. That's essentially what it comes down to here. All right, that was President Trump's response, that tweet or Truth Social post. Here's what Vice President J.D. Vance said in response. Dylan, give us number 2.
We're going to have to do is just continue to enforce the border, Laura. This is a very disappointing ruling from the Supreme Court. Of course, we respect it, but we also think that it was a major, major mistake, as Justices Alito and Thomas pointed out. You know, one of the things that might invite, Laura, is people to come here quite literally on a vacation, give birth, and then all of a sudden the child and their family have the full benefits of American citizenship. It's just a preposterous ruling, and the absurdity of that outcome suggests why the Supreme Court should have went the other way. Now, I know a lot of conservatives, Laura, certainly the people that I'm talking to, that you're talking to, are extremely disappointed in this. I do actually think there's a really big silver lining here, and that's the simple fact that a lot of legal experts expected this case to go the wrong direction by 7-2 or even 8-1. The fact that this case was a 5-4 decision effectively means that the concept of birthright citizenship, which is an absurdity to the 14th Amendment, that concept is hanging by a thread. And so what I take from that is, yes, we've got to fix the immigration system even more. We have to be even more aware of who's coming into our country to make sure that they're not benefiting from this atrocious Supreme Court ruling. But it also means that we have to keep fighting, Laura, because we actually have an opportunity to reverse this decision, just as we've reversed so many bad decisions throughout the generations.
I'm going to disagree and agree with Vice President Vance on a couple of things there. I'm going to agree with him that we have to keep fighting 100%. We have to keep fighting. It is crucial. Number two, or the one that I will disagree with him on, though, is the idea that because it was 5-4 instead of 8-1, makes it better. It doesn't matter if you lose a football game 2-0 on a safety, or if you lose, 19 touchdowns to 0. If you lose, you lose. We can't undo this. So it's going to take something extraordinary for the court to ever have to take this up again. And I don't even know if that's something that is even within the boundaries of reason. But Vice President Vance is right. We are going to have to take some actions now in terms of deciding who gets to come into this country in the first place. This is something that can be done in response to this birthright citizenship ruling. If they're going to rule that anybody who comes here who has a baby has an American citizen, then which of course is not. President Trump was right, by the way, when he talked about the reason for the 14th Amendment. It was to protect the children of slaves, newly freed slaves, or the children of actual slaves, who had been born while slavery was still in force. It was to protect them. They were born here. They have rights here, so that they could not be, told to get out of the country and go to Africa because of course, they were not born in Africa. They were born right here. That was what the original meaning of this, and it was obviously reasonable and sensible. Very, very different situation, very different scenario than, as President Trump said, millionaires, and not even just millionaires, but tourists coming to the United States to have babies in order to anchor them. That's the term, anchor baby, to anchor them to the United States as well, because the American people just won't stand for families being broken up when one of them is an American citizen. That's the bigger picture here. Stephen Miller, President's Chief of Staff for Deputy Chief of Staff, for policy. Stephen Miller, I think, gave the best argument and the best full-throated obliteration of the Supreme Court ruling yesterday on birthright citizenship. Let's listen to Stephen Miller, number 3.
Wound in the heart of the American Republic. Look, Jesse, I can step tomorrow onto the deck of a 747. It does not mean that I am the pilot of that plane and I'm qualified to fly it. Just physically being on U.S. soil does not make you a citizen or qualified to carry on or capable of executing the inheritance of this country. We have people from all over the world, from third world nations that on their own would have never invented the wheel, let alone modern technology, let alone medicine, let alone air travel. And they can just come into the country, have a baby at a hospital, paid for by you and me, and then that baby's automatically a citizen. That baby can sit on a jury when he turns 18 and sit in judgment of you, and sit in judgment of me, and sit in judgment of our loved ones, can decide who our mayors are, our governors are, our presidents are. Citizenship means nothing if it is open to everyone. The idea that you can have a cruise ship filled with foreigners and they just dock at a port for an hour and someone has a baby, Jesse, the baby's an American citizen. They can vote in every election for the rest of their lives. They can be living in a foreign country and cashing welfare checks from American citizens. Look, I know that some of the justices who worked on this, they think that they're so intelligent. There is no possible reading of the 14th Amendment that applies to foreigners with foreign loyalties, foreign citizenship, foreign obligations, foreign everything. And here's another point. Here's a pretty good clue.
Okay, that's enough points from Stephen Miller there, and they were all brilliant. And he's exactly right. The example, as absurd as it might sound, of a cruise ship, docking at an American port and having a room or a ship full of babies who become American citizens, it's absurd just in its description, but it's accurate. That is what they have done here. They have bastardized the 14th Amendment, bastardized birthright citizenship, which was done for a noble reason, to protect the children who are born to slaves in the United States of America, so that when emancipation happened and after the Civil War, these these babies, these children, these teenagers, whatever they are, however old they are when they were born in the United States, they became American citizens. That was a very, very noble and obvious decision by the framers and the founders when it comes to the amendments to the Constitution. This is so it wasn't really the founders, but this is what the government did. Now remember, this Constitution of ours has only been amended 27 times in 250 years of our history. It is a very, very difficult thing to do. Some people are calling for a repeal of the 14th Amendment, which means we have to amend the Constitution to do what they did, to undo what they did, basically, or to clarify it in whatever way, it needed to be done. That's not going to happen. We were just talking about what it would take a few seconds ago. Somebody in the chat mentioned it. Convention of States. Convention of States, in order to undo an amendment that is being misapplied or is being, like I said, bastardized in whatever reason. I don't know if the juice is going to be worth the squeeze, because the danger of opening up a convention of states, and I have in the past, I've had people on from the John Birch Society and other organizations that want to do a convention of states because we want to fix the things that are broken. With respect to the Constitution or interpretations of the Constitution. And I have supported it in the past. But I will tell you what, over the course of the last, I want to say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years since I first started talking about the Convention of States, I've got to tell you, I don't trust the Republicans to do the right thing. If the Constitution suddenly becomes open to slicing and dicing, to adding, to subtracting, and so forth, the Democrats have been overtaken by communists. It's good Lord. Can you imagine if the socialist communists who have taken over the Democrat Party got access to the Constitution? And I don't think the Republican Party is strong enough nor willed enough. They don't have the will to stop them if it did come open. So we're going to have to deal with things as is. We're not going to change the 14th Amendment. We're not going to open up a convention of states, nor should we, in order to be able to do that. We're just going to have to deal with it as is. And that means we're going to have some strong decisions made at the congressional level. And we're going to have some strong decisions made at the national security level. What does that mean? It means between the DHS and the State Department, we are going to have to make sure that we are being very, very careful about who we allow into this country, whether they're legal visitors or whether they're temporary residents because they're coming to study here. When it comes to student visas, that kind of thing, work visas, we're going to have to be very, very intentional about who we allow to come into this country, because if they come here and they start popping out quote unquote babies when they're only here as temporaries, and we now know that the 14th Amendment is going to protect those babies as American citizens, it's going to be very, very incumbent upon our State Department to establish those rules and our Department of Homeland Security to ensure that fewer and fewer people are coming into this country. And in fact, if they are found, tracked, and deported immediately if they're pregnant. Because again, we know what the goal is here. The goal is to literally overtake and to change the demographics and thus the electoral prospects of the United States of America. That's how serious this is. All right, let me see if I can get. That's what Stephen Miller says. Sorry, I kind of stole some of his thunder here. Go ahead and play number 4, Dylan.
If making it easy to be an illegal alien isn't enough, how about a reward for
No, number 4, the other one for the second Stephen Miller. Number 4, Stephen Miller 2.0. You just grabbed number 5.
Well, what I'm saying, Jesse, is that you have to now think very carefully about who you let into your country, even on a temporary basis, because the possibility, as you said, for birth tourism, right? The idea that people come here just to have babies on American soil, and that baby gets to be a citizen for life. So you have mothers that come in fully pregnant, have a baby, go home, and again, that baby gets Medicaid, and that baby gets welfare, and that baby gets cash assistance, and can send, leave the baby with, a cousin, a relative, whatever, and then just send welfare checks back home. You can support a whole family in the third world. So yeah, you can't have the kinds of immigration programs other countries have when you can just have a baby here, and now that child is an American citizen. So there's a lot of things we're going to have to take a hard look at, Jesse.
Yeah, they can even get.
Well, yeah, that's good. That's enough. Thank you. That is a hugely important point here. We can do some things here. It's not like we're completely helpless. We can indeed intentionally, and this is where the State Department comes in, establish the rules and tighten them up for whom we allow to come in on visas, to come here for vacation, for tourism, et cetera, et cetera. We are going to have to tighten that up very, very, very closely or very tightly. Tighten it up tightly. That's redundant, but you get the point. And we're going to have to be very, very aggressive when it comes to finding those who cross the border illegally and those who try to overstay those visas. You come here on a student visa and you graduate in May, you better be gone by June 1st. You come here on a work visa and you're no longer working for a company. Goodbye. We got to know where you are and what's going on and get rid of them. People who overstay those visas and then have their babies are going to be a legitimate threat to the republic based on what we're talking about. So there's just no two ways about it. We started to play a clip there of Senator Bernie Moreno, and we're going to talk to Bernie in 1/2 hour at about 8 o'clock, and I'm very much looking forward to that. But we started to play a clip there by mistake. I want you to listen to this clip from Harry Reid circa 1993. Because this is the proposed legislation from Harry Reid, who was then the Senate Majority Leader. This is what Harry Reid in 1993 wanted to do, and Senator Bernie Moreno says, you know what? That sounded like a good idea back then, and it's a better idea right now. Listen to what this says.
If making it easy to be an illegal alien isn't enough, how about offering a reward for being an illegal immigrant? No sane country would do that, right? Guess again. If you break our laws by entering this country without permission and give birth to a child, we reward that child with U.S. citizenship and guarantee of full access to all public and social services this society provides. And that's a lot of services. Is it any wonder that 2/3 of the babies born at taxpayer expense at county-run hospitals in Los Angeles are born to illegal alien mothers?
This was Harry Reid speaking on the floor of the Senate in 1993, and he proposed a bill, and I guess that one didn't have the full context of the bill that he proposed. But Senator Moreno was on Laura Ingraham last night and laid out exactly what he wants to do, which is to bring that legislation up word for word. The Democrats backed it in 1993, and the obvious fact that the Democrat Party has now been taken over by socialists and communists, they're not going to do anything even close to that now, but he's going to, Senator Moreno is, expose them for that hypocrisy and make them vote no. God willing, we can get it out of a committee and get it to a vote. Make them vote no on what Harry Reid proposed in 1993 with respect to limiting birthright citizenship, to stop them. And what, by the way, Harry Reid proposed is that only two people, a mother and a father, who are already American citizens on American soil can give birth to an American baby. You cannot do this any other way. And that's what Bernie is going to propose. We'll talk to him coming up, like I said, at 8 o'clock. It is 7:31 now, and I do see my first guest in the green room, so I want to welcome to the program now from the Center for Immigration Studies. Andrew Arthur is our guest. He is I've been seeing him everywhere, by the way, because Andrew, you have become a very much in-demand person. You are a CIS's expert on this issue, so I really appreciate you fitting us into your very busy schedule. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Bob, and quite frankly, it's an honor to be here, and I'm truly grateful.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you. So everybody is reacting, obviously, across the political spectrum. The left is cheering. Anti-American zealots are cheering. They are. President Trump said, congratulations to Chairman Xi and the Chinese Communist Party, because you just got a huge victory handed to you by our Supreme Court. What was your initial reaction? Did you expect this, Andrew?
So I expected what Justice Kavanaugh had to say in his concurrence in the case, in which he said that the Trump Executive Order 14160 on birthright citizenship violated the Immigration and Nationality Act. I certainly did not expect, Bob, and I wrote a lot about this in advance, I didn't expect the opinion that came down from the majority, the one that was authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, that essentially reaffirmed an 1898 case, Wong Kim Ark, on constitutional grounds. The Supreme Court in general, and the Roberts Court in particular, generally engage in what's called constitutional avoidance. They pass on constitutional issues when they're procedural ones, statutory ones, that they can rely upon. So the key takeaway on this is, if you support the rule of law in the United States and you support immigration enforcement, the law is worse this morning than it was at this time, or than it was on Sunday, because this Supreme Court decision based on constitutional principles is now the law of the land.
Yeah, it is. And what President Trump said, and I was just playing before you came in, what President Trump had to say, as well as what Vice President Vance had to say, as well as what Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller had to say about this. And that is that the birther tourism industry, if you will, is going to get this massive shot in the arm. And again, President Trump congratulating China for their victory here. They're saying we are going to have some tools still in our tool belt. However, though, we can do some things to limit who comes into this country now in the first place, particularly if the birther tourism industry is now, again, kind of been put on a fast track and on steroids. We're going to have to clamp down a lot more on whom we give visas to: work visas, student visas, visitation tourists, and so on and so forth. So they're basically saying this is a bad ruling by the Supreme Court, but it's not like we are without options here. What is your understanding of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there is a full panoply of opportunities available thanks to this opinion. Generally, when it comes to those non-immigrant visas, the sort of long-term non-immigrant visas for students and H-1Bs, you can bring your spouse with you to the United States when you come here. And most of those things are purely administrative. Of course, if you bring your spouse to the United States with you, and we have a birthright citizenship rule, and your spouse becomes pregnant or you become pregnant, that child automatically becomes a United States citizen. I've long argued that we should not allow the spouses of non-immigrants to come to this country. And I think that this gives the administration an opportunity to revisit that issue. Then, of course, there's the fact that, right now the Department of State rules tell consular officers, and in essence tell CBP officers at the ports of entry, that they can't ask a woman if she's pregnant unless they have, clear and convincing evidence that she is pregnant. We can change that administratively. And quite frankly, we should put a question on every non-immigrant, every tourist visa questionnaire that says, are you pregnant and are you planning on giving birth in the United States? So that's an important thing we should have done a long time ago. It's a fix that can be made. It's definitely something that can be done. But here's the third thing nobody's talking about, Bob. Right now, if you are born in the United States and you're a birthright citizen and your parents are foreign nationals, when you turn 21, you can petition for them to get green cards. That's really what's at the heart of this birth tourism industry. We can change the law. Congress can change the law to say, yeah, you can, do that when you're 21, provided that you have 21 years of residence in the United States. Or 30 years of residence, or 15, whatever rule they want to set, so that we can ensure that only those people who are citizens and actually residents of this country for a long term and dedicated more or less to the principles that we all agree upon are able to petition, immediate relatives to come to this country. These are fixes that should have been made in the past. They weren't really that necessary. Thanks to the Supreme Court's decision in Trump versus Barber, they're not even, necessary. They're now critical.
That's a great way to describe it. We're talking to Andrew Arthur from Center for Immigration Studies. So when you talk about the chain migration is essentially what we're talking about here. These are legislative matters. When you say we can fix that relatively simply, we have a very slim majority right now, obviously in both chambers. So is there any chance of getting anything like this done before November, or are we just going to have to win the midterms? When I say we, I mean those of us who are believers in the Constitution and sovereignty. This is really a matter of national sovereignty, and quite frankly, a lot of people don't like the term "the Great Replacement," but it is in play now. How quickly do you think they can move on some sort of legislative protection now that we have this Supreme Court ruling?
So I've spent 8 years as a congressional staffer, and managed to draft and negotiate a number of bills. And generally, Congress only acts when it has to. And this is one of those situations in which Congress sort of has to act to address these issues. There are things that the Republicans, even with a slim majority, can do. They can attach this to an appropriations bill. They can put it on the National Defense Authorization Act. Both of those are must-pass pieces of legislation. And, you can use the rules of the Senate in order to get them passed with less than that 60-vote majority. This is one of those times when we need the best legislative minds, both members and staffers, to get together and craft what they need, work with the parliamentarian, get some, legislation that can go into effect. But, here's the black swan, Bob, that people always forget about. And I was on Capitol Hill on September the 11th. Something's going to go wrong. I don't want it to go wrong, but it will go wrong. And it's going to highlight a lot of these issues. And at that point, it's not even going to be critical. It's going to be crucial that Congress act. It would be better that Congress acts, with a little bit of, distance and, dispassionateness. But, you don't want to be in that situation. Let's avoid that for the good of the American people. Let's get, some bills to the president's desk. Let's have a Rose Garden signing. Let's fix some of the abuses that we all agree upon, move forward.
Yeah. How difficult is it, though, to get past the parliamentarian? Because you talked about attaching some of these things to an appropriations bill so they can do it with a simple majority, but the parliamentarian has to let some of those go through. And we know that that has been an obstacle in the recent past.
Yeah, and again, the parliamentarian plays a crucial role. And for conservatives or Republicans, who want to criticize the current parliamentarian, keep in mind, she's the same woman that kept a massive Biden-era amnesty from being added to a reconciliation bill. So, it's a two-edged sword. She actually has a great deal of experience in immigration. I believe at one time we were even colleagues at the old INS. But, it's one of those things that requires deft legislative drafting, understanding the rules. One of the reasons why the people that we refer to as the Lions, the Henry Hydes and the Ted Kennedys of the world, were so effective is because they knew the rules and they knew how to use them. It's now time for Mike Johnson and, Thune and all of these people to summon up all of their powers, bring in the A team, get something drafted, get it in the can. Again, I have 6 red line bills on my wall, Bob, and I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. If I can manage to pull it off, I think that there are plenty of people who are staffing the speaker in particular right now, much better lawyers, much better legal minds than I am. They can get this done.
Well, and the fact is they've had a head start, right? Because almost every observer who has any familiarity with the court at all, who watched and listened to the oral arguments in this case, expected this to be the result. In fact, Vice President Vance actually was on yesterday on television talking about how they thought it might be 7-2 or 8-1, that the majority of even the originalists, I don't like to call them conservatives on the court, that's not what they're supposed to be, but the originalists might actually come along. So, but everybody knew that this was coming. So, it's not like they didn't have an opportunity to plan for this eventuality, so they can leap into action right away, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, I was sort of hopeful that they were going to resolve this on procedural grounds, which would have given Congress a little bit more runway. But, you go to war with the army you have, and you go into politics with the laws you're faced with. So, they did have a head start. And here's the other thing, Bob, and I credit you and many others in your profession with bringing to the attention of the American people these crucial issues. If you read the New York Times, you'll see, birthright citizenship happens in an infinitesimal number of cases. Well, we're a republic of 345 million people. So, anything short of, 10 million cases is simply going to be a fraction of the total. But, this is a serious issue. It is one that, has serious national security implications. And I credit the Wall Street Journal. About 3 months ago, they published a great article on a Saturday that talked about these Chinese plutocrats who were, sending their vital fluids to the United States where they would be, mixed with, let's skip the biology, but basically that there were surrogate mothers in this country who would, carry children who would be born here, to birthright children. So, there's been a great deal of attention paid to this, and those are the sort of stories that shock the conscience. We can disagree as to whether, a newborn, cute little pink gurgling baby wrapped in a pink and blue hospital blanket should be a citizen or not, when they've got loving parents around. It's a different issue when, billionaires are using science to, engage in commerce abroad, specifically to become an Old Testament king and have 100 children all born in the United States. And, that's just pure objectification. It's a completely different case. It's an easier case for Republicans to make about why necessary fixes are indeed necessary.
Andrew, do you have thoughts on the quote unquote great replacement theory a lot of people have spoken on when it comes to immigration here? And I'm asking that now because of this ruling, obviously, but I'm looking even a generation down the line and another generation after that. And here's what I mean is if my wife and I, if my wife becomes pregnant and I go to China or anywhere else and give birth, we're giving birth to an American baby because we can be anywhere in the world. We are Americans. So if I take this down, again, using the China example, a Chinese mother gives birth here in the United States. That child is an American citizen. They can go back and raise that child as a good little communist in China or a Russian baby or whatever it is. And when that child grows up and has children, are they not automatically having American children as well? Because now we're talking about around the world, American babies being born to American citizens, even if they are foreigners by culture and by geographic location, until eventually they all say, okay, now is the time to come in and move in massive numbers, again, over the course maybe of a generation or two. So we're talking about a long game here, and literally overtake the native population of the United States.
Yeah, and here's the thing with respect to great replacement theory, I think that assumes too much thought on the part of any given immigrant or group of immigrants or even, immigrant organizations. One of the things that we saw under the Biden administration didn't involve that much thought. They just didn't believe in borders. They didn't believe that anybody should be kept out of the United States. They didn't think that it was fair that a kid could be born in Cleveland, Ohio, live and work here for his entire life and maybe become president if a kid in San Pedro Sula didn't have the same opportunities. There's simply no better way to describe the strange point of view of the Biden administration aside from that. But here's the good thing, Bob, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily grasp this. Congress has already anticipated, in fact, they anticipated back in the 50s that something like that could happen. So, if you go abroad and you have a kid, that kid isn't automatically a United States citizen. Depends upon the amount of time that you have spent in the United States, the age that, you were when you left here. And, there are a lot of different factors. You almost need a slide rule to figure the entire thing out. So Congress has already anticipated that. Citizenship is one of those things that you can actually lose, that you can't necessarily convey as easily as a lot of people think. And if you do have a child abroad, then, you need to get what's called a certificate of birth abroad. And that's a very difficult document to get. There are, I actually have friends who are, basically in exile right now abroad because they're married to non-United States citizens. They have children, but they can't bring the whole unit over. And, which again, just sort of underscores how ridiculous yesterday's decision was. There are citizens who want to bring their families to the United States, citizens who grew up here, attended school here, or, purely, completely American. And they have to jump through ridiculous hoops in order to get citizenship for a child, for their own child. Whereas, you drop a kid in the United States and all of a sudden, under yesterday's decision, that kid's a citizen. None of it makes sense. And, it's stories like that and examples like the one that you gave, honestly, that sort of underscore all of the abuses that need to be addressed, that Congress must address and that Congress can address. So, these are really important things. But when you talk about the Chinese example, again, probably that kid's kids, if they grow up in Beijing or Shanghai or Guangzhou, aren't going to be citizens. But they themselves can come to the United States, so they can find a nice place to live in California, run for Congress, or let's just say they run for the county council, work their way up to Congress, become political leaders, and then potentially become president, in any event. But yeah, that's the real danger. And that's the danger that Justice Thomas was underscoring in his dissent yesterday. This is a real thing. When you talk about the Chinese, they're a 5,000-year-old culture, Bob. 20 years is, the blink of an eye when you're talking about a 5,000-year-old culture. And you look at, their defense strategies, you look at their economic policies, all of these things have long timelines. So what you're describing, what I'm talking about, none of these things are really outside the realm of possibility. And, we face an existential threat from the Chinese Communist Party, whether we admit it or not. They don't like us as, the ultimate hegemon. They want to be a hegemon, and they want to replace us as the hegemon. So, yeah, there are real issues here we need to address. And it's, the American people shouldn't be Pollyannas about, all of those dangers.
I don't know if I'm glad to hear or angry to hear what you just said as being the case. I did not know what you said about if an American citizen gives birth abroad, and I don't know if it just outside of the United States. What if they're visiting? If you're a 6-month pregnant woman goes to visit Niagara Falls and goes into early labor and has her child in Canada, it's difficult for that child, the new child, to actually who is an American citizen, but to get American citizenship.
Yeah, to get the document.
There's a form you're talking about you have to get to be able to prove that your child is and to get them registered as an American citizen. I did not know that.
Yeah, and I actually went through this when I had my first background investigation back in 1992, Bob. My roommate was a guy who lived in Potomac, Maryland, grew up there, went to the local schools. And, I had to list him on my background investigation because he was my law school roommate. Well, the FBI came back to me and they're like, this individual was born in Germany. One, I didn't know that. Two, I couldn't really figure out why that was an issue, but it became an issue because I was living potentially with a foreign national and therefore couldn't, hold a clearance. So, I had to have him get a bunch of paperwork so that, I could get a clearance. And, I felt awful for it. I didn't know that. Then, of course, I had a friend who was very, very dear to me, my oldest friend, and I put her down as a reference. She was actually born in the Philippines. She was born a Filipino national. But, I had to get paperwork for her because I had listed, her as a person, who was my oldest friend, the person who had known me the longest. So, this is a very complicated thing. Probably, if you go back in time, if you remember the kerfluffle over the Obama birth certificate, of course, Obama's mother was a United States citizen. His father was a Kenyan national. And if he hadn't been born in the United States, his mother would not have conveyed U.S. citizenship to him. Of course, he was born in the United States, but wouldn't have conveyed citizenship to him because of the age that she was and the period of time that she had lived in the United States. Over the age of 14, I think it was, under the rules that existed at the time. So, that was really the only issue why the place of Barack Obama's birth was even an issue. So, yeah, there are a lot of rules. And when I say they're complicated, when I was an immigration judge, Bob, these were some of the hardest things that I had to figure out. And by the way, for your younger listeners, and I know most of them are probably for you, a slide rule was an old thing that we used to, have to use to figure out trigonometry and calculus. So, in any event.
Well, Andrew, that's great. Example that you gave, particularly with your roommate and so forth. And like I said, I'm troubled to know that it's that difficult for an American citizen who has a child abroad to prove that their child is and give them status as an American. But everything that we just saw that the court gave us yesterday, any foreigner can come into the country and boom, their child is automatically a citizen if they're born here. There is a long game here that they are playing. Like you said, it's a blink of an eye when you're talking about an ancient culture like the Chinese culture. It's a blink. And it's not just China, by the way. We need to point out, when you surrender sovereignty, which is what I see this as, and which is what I saw the entirety of the Biden administration, surrendering sovereignty. We were, Andrew, how did you feel during the Biden years? It's like a flashpoint. It's a trigger for me anytime I'm reminded of this, that Texas said, we've had enough. If you won't build the border, federal government, then we will do it ourselves. They built the chain, the razor wire fencing and so on and so forth. We're not coming into the United States by way of Texas. And Biden sent forklifts to the site and put those prongs underneath and raised up that razor wire and created a little bridge for the caravans to just stream in. I've never seen a more direct example of the surrendering of American sovereignty as that at that moment in time. So you think about everything that Biden has done and what the Democrats have done here to surrender our sovereignty, and what the court did yesterday was add to that. So there is a long game, there is a short game. Yeah, there it is again. Thanks, Dylan. I every time I see that, Andrew, that just triggers me. But there is a significant portion of the U.S. population that has decided we should be globalists. We should be an open border society. Everybody should be able to come and go as they please. That is a very dangerous proposition. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, and Bob, let me just, try to end on an up note, because we've talked about, the decision yesterday, but let's go back to last week when the Supreme Court issued a completely different opinion on immigration, and that was el otro lado, pretty, straightforward. It seems pretty banal when I tell you what it said. It said that an alien isn't arriving in the United States such that they must be allowed to apply for asylum until they actually enter the United States.
Yes.
The Ninth Circuit had said that a foreign national who was right on the threshold of the United States had arrived in the United States and had to be let into the country to apply for asylum. When you just showed that picture, and it was a good one, of those forklifts lifting the concertina wire down on the banks of the Rio Grande that Texas had put there. The reason, the justification that the Biden administration gave was the United States government doesn't have the authority to use force to keep people out of the United States because it must let them in to apply for asylum. That was the argument. The Supreme Court's decision in el otro lado wiped that argument away. El otro lado stands for the proposition, Justice Alito writing for the majority, that the United States government has an absolute sovereign right to prevent people from entering this country, and that the asylum statute does not trump that absolute sovereign right. So if you're looking for an upside on this day, that's the upside, Bob.
I'll take that, and I'll take the TPS ruling as well, which is about as simple as it gets. Temporary means not permanent. You can't stay here forever, and the Haitian population has got to go back now. So yeah, there are some positive things about it, but the birthright citizenship is obviously the big banana here. Andrew, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on. Keep up the great work at CIS. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much, Bob. And I'm going to use Big Banana to refer to this decision from this point forward.
I don't know where that came from, but you're welcome to it. Thanks, Andrew.
Have a great time, Bob.
You too. Thank you. All right, there you go. Andrew Arthur. Yeah, this is the big one. Like I said, it's the we did get some wins in some other smaller cases, but this is obviously the huge one. All right, I've got a break here before Senator Bernie Moreno joins us. He's going to be here momentarily, but this will give me an opportunity to remind you about our friends in Lakewood. at Charlie's Auto Repair. Charlie's Auto Repair has been taking care of cars for decades in Northeast Ohio. I don't care where you live. It is worth the drive to get an honest mechanic. And that's what you get with the always MAGA, always America first, politically incorrect mechanic, Charlie Kalani. He's going to take great care of you, your car, whether it's engine related or whether it's computer related, electronics related. He's going to take great care of you, as he always has, and he's never going to raise the costs on you. He's never going to upcharge you, tell you that something took longer than it did, so there's that extra hour of labor. Here's a part that needed to be replaced that you didn't think did. No, he's not that way. If you find an honest mechanic, I don't care where you're coming from, it's worth the drive to go to that person. And that's in Lakewood on Madison. Phone number there is 216-470-0170. Again, 216-470-0170. Save yourself some money, too, if you're a veteran, active military, first responder, or even just have a concealed carry license. You show those things, you're going to get 10% off all your services at Charlie's Auto Repair. Charlie Kalani, our man, the politically incorrect mechanic, is a true patriot and a true MAGA warrior. Make sure that you support him as he supports us as a foundational partner of Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. So thank you to Charlie. So I want to play this clip before Senator Moreno comes in this morning. This was the one from yesterday that I was discussing a few moments ago. This one should be number 6, Dylan. If you can give us number 6 to kind of set the table for Senator Moreno. This is Bernie Moreno last night on Laura Ingraham talking about the Supreme Court's ruling on birthright citizenship and the 14th Amendment. Senator Moreno has an idea, and that idea is, let's turn to the Democrats for a solution, but not 2026 Democrats. 2026 Democrats are socialists and communists. Just last night, another primary, this one in Denver, Colorado, another socialist beat a long-term Democrat in a primary. The socialists are taking over that party. So how about we go back to a point where, relatively speaking anyway, Democrats used to be at least reasonable. That's a relative term, but they used to be at least reasonable when it comes to matters like this. And so this is what Bernie Moreno said he wanted to do last night on Laura Ingraham. Watch.
In 1993, Harry Reid, a hardcore Democrat at the time, came up with a bill that had 10 points, one of which was clarifying that birthright citizenship does not apply to foreign-born parents. You have to be an American citizen on American soil for that to apply. This bill also, by the way, cracked down on the numbers of asylum seekers. It cracked down on human smuggling. It massively tightened our borders and really hit employers hard who hired illegals. I'm going to introduce, when I get back from recess on July 13th, the identical bill. And Laura, what it's going to do is highlight two things. The Democrats of today are nothing like the Democrats of 1993. And if they choose to reject a bill sponsored by their majority leader that they named an airport in Las Vegas after, then I think, to my Republican colleagues, we have no choice. We have to recognize that these Democrats want to systematically destroy this country. So what does that mean? We have to eliminate the filibuster and get this thing done.
Oh,
Amen. That is something that I have talked to Bernie Moreno about numerous times over the course of the last few months, about why can't we nuke the filibuster. He has repeatedly told me about the obstacles and the number of Republicans in the Senate that don't want to nuke the filibuster, and not just because they're afraid that the Democrats, if they regain power, will use it for their means as well, but simply because they don't support the Trump agenda. It's always been an obstacle, but maybe this is a flashpoint. What he told Laura Ingraham last night, maybe this is, the way, if you will. Let's see if the Democrats will adopt something that their own Democrat majority leader proposed in 1993. And if not, maybe this will be something that moves Republicans off of that stance that they have taken and makes them take action here. So that was Bernie Moreno last night on Laura Ingraham. This is Bernie Moreno right now on Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. Let's get that right. There he is. Senator, good morning. How are you, sir?
I am fantastic. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me.
It's appreciate you being here, sir. All right. Obviously, you and I are going to talk about saving Social Security in a moment, but I want to start here because this is obviously just dropped yesterday, this massive Supreme Court decision. What was your first reaction when you heard it?
I think President Trump said it right. Congratulations to the president of China. Congratulations to people from all over the planet that want to come here and take advantage of the United States of America. I was really proud last year that we voted the working families tax cuts that created Trump accounts. These are $1,000 that go to the accounts of newborn babies. Now, people from all over the globe can come here, have a baby, and get a Trump account. Get the United States government to create an account, a retirement account for them, a savings account for them. This is basically a nuclear bomb on our sovereignty of what it means to be an American citizen. It totally degrades it for natural born citizens. And by the way, it degrades it for people like me who followed the law and got the privilege to become an American citizen. It's a total disgrace. I think JD said it well last night. It was a 5-4 decision. So if we can keep at this, put more pressure on this, we can flip this decision because it's on a razor's edge. This 5-4 decision. Some of us thought it was going to be 7-2 or 8-1.
Yeah, Senator, I'm unfamiliar. How often does that happen where a Supreme Court decision is brought back up before the court again, they agree to hear it again, and then have another vote on the same thing that they had done before? Because I wasn't aware that was a commonality.
Well, I mean, it's happened with obviously some big decisions like Chevron and obviously Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision. But if we can get the legislation I proposed yesterday, which by the way is not mine, total plagiarism, by the way, Harry Reid's exact legislation across the finish line, which is 10 things that it does on immigration, one of which is clarifies that there is no birthright citizenship if you're a foreign national or here illegally, which is what we've been saying all along. Somebody can challenge that law and then goes to the Supreme Court in a different context because it's not an executive order. This is exactly the facts that Kavanaugh laid out. Look, I know your viewers and listeners are really busy, but please take the time to read the minority dissent on this case. This is absolutely an historic ruling in terms of what the minority is saying the consequences of the ruling are going to be.
Yeah, very, very true. And in fact, I read one of the quotes from Justice Alito. He said, quote, "A woman from a country hostile to America can come to the U.S. to give birth, then return to a place where the child would be inculcated with hatred of this country. Even if he plots to harm this country, he cannot be deprived of his status as a citizen." That is what makes this so egregious, in my opinion, Senator, is the fact that it's not just the globalism nature of this and so on, and the resources. By the way, thanks for making me even more upset about this, because I forgot about the Trump account's going to be now available to these, foreign babies who are being called American citizens. But it's so much bigger than that, because we are talking about, individuals who are not necessarily fans and supporters of the United States of America having access to our system, being able to not only vote in our elections, they can be raised in a country where they're inculcated with hate for the country and come here and run for office, not just vote, but actually get votes and perhaps establish policy down the line. That's what makes this so dangerous, is the long game.
Well, and by the way, their kids are American citizens. Their grandkids are American citizens. I mean, you change the trajectory of what can happen. I mean, this is a systematic destruction of the United States of America. They can all vote here, by the way, including absentee. So think about this. You could have a large swath of communities in China and Iran and Russia and North Korea, because they've given birth to relatives here, that they can request absentee ballots and vote in our own elections. These are hostile nations. And there's no country on earth that could possibly be this stupid to allow something like this. That's why, for me, it's imperative to put Harry Reid's bill on the floor. I don't call it my bill. I call it Harry Reid's bill back on the floor. The Senate Democrat majority leader. They named an airport in Las Vegas after him. This is a guy that they idolize, to show two things. The Democrats have become extraordinarily extreme. This is not a normal party. This is not a time for us to think about traditions or the way things used to be in the Senate, because those days are long gone. And quite frankly, Bob, I'm going to say something else. We don't need to have these people come here, have babies, and go back to countries where they're indoctrinated to hate America. That's already happening with native-born people. You see what's happening. This isn't the Democrat progressive wing. This is the full-on we hate America wing that's winning elections. So for me, this is common sense. The filibuster is great when you have normal people on the other side of the aisle. but these are not normal times. We have to get rid of the filibuster, pass the Save America Act, pass Harry Reid's bill, and pass all manner of other legislation like permanently securing our border to make certain that we secure this country. Because if we don't, Bob, in 2 years, this country will be right back at the same place at the edge of the apocalypse like we were in 2024.
Senator, I'm smiling slightly as you said that because on a few different occasions where you and I have talked in the past several months, I've brought up the filibuster being nuked again, and you've kind of shut me down and said, no, we're not talking about that. It's a non-starter. It's not, yes, of course we should do it, you said, but there's not a chance. There's too many Republicans who don't support President Trump. I'm not talking about things that are not possible. And now here we are for the first time in an interview. You brought it up, not me.
Well,
we
look,
got to nuke the filibuster, and that's how important this is.
Well, this is a moment, Bob. This is a moment. Look, we can't allow this trajectory to continue. I've made my business career looking around the corner, and I'm telling you, you game out what we're seeing. These are not, they're a little bit more left-leaning politicians. These are full-blown American haters, Bob. When you and I were kids, call it in our early 20s, and I said to you that somebody's going to run for Congress saying that they use the American flag as toilet paper, or they think that America is responsible for 9/11. Imagine 25 years ago somebody said that. You'd say there's no way that person even gets on the ballot. They wouldn't even get the 50 signatures required to run for Congress. They are winning, Bob. These are the people who they are putting up as the standard bearers for the Democrat Party. Some of these people will make it into Congress. Some will make it into the United States Senate. So for us to think, oh, well, you know what? We just have to convince some like-minded Democrats to vote along with us with common sense legislation. Those are happening. I mean, it's sad. Quite frankly, it's sad. We're celebrating our 250th anniversary on Saturday, but it's sad that those days are gone. But we can't be stupid. We can't be stupid people and just say, well, we're going to put our head in the sand and hope and pray that the Democrats, once they get elected, go from making those kinds of thoughts and statements to all of a sudden being rational and reasonable. It doesn't happen.
So how far are we away from that? I mean, we're sitting here, we can't even get the Save America Act passed, which is an 80-20 or 85-15 issue. The House is doing what they can there. They're basically saying until it gets done over there, we're not moving any legislation over here as well. I don't want to see the legislature come to a standstill, but here we are, and we still have recalcitrant Republicans who won't vote for that, much less to nuke the filibuster and let the other things that you correctly say are necessary to protect and preserve this republic. So what now?
Yeah, so we got 50 votes for the Save America Act, 0 Democrats and 3 Republicans that won't go along with it. So that's a good start.
But you've got a majority leader. Well, let that come up for a vote, though, right? I mean,
no, we do. We got to a vote. We got 50 votes. So we got 50. So we have 50. That's good news. That's all we need to get rid of the filibuster. That gives us a starting point. I actually sent Senator Rick Scott, who chairs the conservative group of senators called the Steering Committee, a memo for him to take a look at. There are things we can do. So we can keep the filibuster, but we can change a couple key rules. One of which is after cloture, after you hit the 60 vote threshold, each senator is allowed to speak for no more than 1 hour, twice on the same topic. Mirror those same rules before cloture. So each senator can only speak for 1 hour, twice during the same quote unquote legislative day on one topic. And then the second thing you do is you make amendments. So if I'm amending a bill, that's considered a speech. So if you game that out, 47 Democrats speaking twice, right? That's 94 for 2 hours each. That's 188 hours. So you let the Democrats talk for 188 hours, offer amendments, and then you can call the question. And that is the path that we can actually use. So 108 hours of painful listening to nonsense. We stick together as 50 Republicans. We don't need 53. And then we call the question. It requires a simple majority to pass a bill.
Okay. And is Senator Thune, though, the majority leader, is he supportive of this talking filibuster?
Well, we have to get 50 Republicans to be in favor of it, because if not, we can't get it done. I think Senator Thune will do what 50 Republicans want to do.
Okay.
I mean, remember, he's not the boss in the sense that he hired and fires and disciplined us. No. He's in charge of the, laying out the agenda and the strategy. But he has to do what 50 Republicans want. I think the case to be made to my colleagues is very straightforward. If you think these are normal times, then everything I'm saying to you won't make sense. But what we've seen over the last week or two, ironically and sadly, on the anniversary of this country's 250 years, these are not normal times. I mean, Dan Goldman in New York, a rabid lunatic leftist, was it crazy enough for the voters of New York? And he lost his primary. You saw the testimony yesterday in the House with the mom whose daughter had died. I mean, I was actually thinking about that all day. What would I do if that was my son or my daughter who died in that tragic way? And seeing these members of Congress just fluff it off, say, we've had 4 hearings about this. We don't need to talk about this anymore. I mean, I don't know. She God bless her. I thought she kept her composure. She probably doesn't think she did. I think she did. I would have absolutely lost my mind. I can't even imagine what that was like, Bob. And yet the Democrats just sat there, stone cold, stone faced, didn't care, no emotion. Wanted to talk about Alex Preddy and Renee Good. I mean, these guys they're sick people, Bob.
They are. One of them, Pramila Jayapal, actually said, this is the 4th one of these we've sat through. And that's what triggered, I think, Sharon Gorman's mom, is you're complaining about listening to Gold Star. I'm sorry, not, what are they called? Not Gold Star families.
Angel moms.
Angel moms. Thank you. But you're tired of listening to us talk about the fact that your policies supportive of sanctuary cities allows these people to live here and to target and to kill people like my daughter and others. And you're tired of listening to it. That was the biggest slap in the face, Senator, that I've seen in such a very long time. I was so glad to see Representative Lawler speak out against that, and of course then got into that back and forth there with Jamie Raskin. But I was so glad to see somebody stepping up, because they literally are rolling their eyes at the deaths of American citizens who have been victimized by people who had no business being here in the first place. And every Democrat has some of that blood on their hands if they support sanctuary cities, which is what that was all about. So,
and by the way, just back to Harry Reid's bill. Basically would have made sanctuary cities completely illegal in 1993. Harry Reid talked about that's one of the 10 points. No sanctuary cities. By the way, listen to this also in this bill: cap of 50,000 refugees a year. Biden was letting 50 refugees a day come across this border. By the way, they weren't really refugees; it was all fake.
That's what they claim.
Also, listen to this one. This will sound pretty interesting. A cap on legal immigration. Say, hey, look, we got to put a pause here. This could lower wages. This could affect communities. And this was right on the heels of passing the bill that created temporary protective status, because his concern was, hey, look, this bill just got passed 3 years ago, this law, temporary protective status. There's an opportunity for administrations in the future to abuse this. So we have to put a cap so that it's clear that you can't bring in too many immigrants at one time. This is common sense legislation from the 1990s from Democrats. And there was 2 Democrats that co-sponsored that bill. Only 1 Republican did, by the way. That's another conversation to show you how the Republican Party has shifted on immigration, because there's, quite frankly, some of the old Republican Party that loved illegal migration because it lowered wages. And they thought that was a good thing, not a bad thing. Obviously, Republicans today, led by people like myself and, of course, most importantly, President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, are like, no. Immigration that lowers wages is, I don't care if it's good for business. It's not good for American workers. So this is the seismic shift in the party, the 2 parties that we're seeing. And look, Bob, we got to fight for this, because this is setting this country up between not passing Save America, so no voter ID, no proof of citizenship, birthright citizenship, basically opening the doors wide open, and then of course what will happen if the Democrats were to take over is completely open the border. We have it sealed tight, 13 months, not one single illegal encounter. They would open that up. This country would be Europe within 24 months. That's all it takes. You open the border like what they envision, it's gone. And Americans' voting rights are completely gone. You're watered down to basically oblivion.
I completely agree, Senator. And thank you for your clarity on that, because that is exactly what we needed to hear. Okay, headlines. ATR, that's Americans for Tax Reform. Bernie Moreno, not Sanders. Bernie Moreno joins Elizabeth Warren to impose 56% tax rate. National Review, Bernie Moreno's left turn. I printed out the articles from both of those publications. Well, Americans for Tax Reform just had it on their website, but I printed out those articles. And as I texted you the day I saw your op-ed and your post on X, in which you said, we don't agree on much, you and Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, but we agreed that Social Security is in trouble and it needs to be saved. So, Senator, the critics have been all over you for this over the last 4 days, and I really appreciate you coming on here to talk about it, or 4 or 5 days. Let's talk about the Moreno-Warren payroll tax increase, as it's being called by Americans for Tax Reform. They're saying that it would impose a 56% combined tax rate on small and mid-sized businesses here in the state of Ohio. That's what I messaged you on that day when I saw it. And you sent me a chart and a couple of other explainers that, quite frankly, I think we're going to need to go into more depth on right now. I'll show the chart here if you want, so that while we're talking about this, it's going to cover over your face. So go ahead and give us a bit of this, and then tell us what's going on.
All right, sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to clarify the difference between an op-ed and a bill. I think some of my friends at ATR and others don't know that they process the difference between starting a conversation on a tough subject versus proposing legislation. But that's okay. Look, they obviously have a very strong point of view, as do I, by the way, which is that Americans are taxed too much. We don't have a revenue problem in this country. We have a spending problem in this country. So I totally and completely agree with that position. What this conversation was intended to do is set the stage on something that will be the topic of the 2028 presidential election, which is, what do we think about Social Security? And there, I want to be clear so that anybody watching has me completely on record. Social Security is a good program. I do not want Social Security to end. Social Security has allowed seniors to live their final years with dignity, as it should be. And this idea that we want to scrap or eliminate Social Security, I just want to put a hard red line on that. Says I will absolutely, to the death, fight to make certain that people are able to have Social Security. We need to be a compassionate country that recognizes that people who make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, that work their whole life, their tail off their whole life, and retire at 65, there's no scenario in which they can save enough money to allow them to even live a basic life for the rest of their years. And raising the retirement age isn't an answer. I employed a lot of technicians, Bob. These are guys that's back-breaking work, people who work at factories and manufacturing, drivers, etc. They could think that they want to work longer than 65, but their body won't let them do it. So what do we have to do? So I just make that clear. We have to keep Social Security. In fact, one of the disappointing comments that Grover made, I consider Grover a friend. Maybe he doesn't think of me as a friend now, but I consider him a friend and an ally. We're part of a big tent. When they asked him, do you think we should keep Social Security? He said, we should have health savings accounts. Like, what is a health savings account going to do for you in retirement? You're on Medicare. That was such a crazy answer because, of course, maybe he doesn't want to say the quiet part out loud, which is that he doesn't think Social Security is a good program. So that's number one. Number two, I think we should head towards a tax system that is more simple and more fair. So, for example, on Social Security, you had the chart up a second ago. If somebody in Ohio makes $50,000 a year, they pay 12.4% of their wages between what they pay and their employer pays. Let me repeat that. You make 50 grand a year, 12.4% of your wages go into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you make $1 million a year, 1.2% of your wages go into Social Security. That's fundamentally unfair. And when it comes to small businesses, we have to talk about what that means. About 82% of small businesses are self-proprietors. They don't have employees. Basically, people are creating LLCs or corporations so that they can contract with other companies. So obviously, we're not talking about people who employ others. And of the small businesses that do employ others, 94% of them make less than the Social Security cap in terms of profits. So this isn't hitting small businesses. This is hitting LeBron James, who, by the way, in the first 2 minutes of his first game every year, hits his Social Security cap. This hits corporate lawyers that bill $2,500 an hour that make millions of dollars a year. Now, the difference between me and Elizabeth Warren is I will say to those people, congratulations, great job. You earned it, you deserve it. But I believe everybody should pay the same into Social Security. And this one simple fix, and there need to be others, will be enough to make Social Security solvent for decades. Now, there's other things that we can do. We can introduce a private element to Social Security, allow some of that to go into some sort of index fund. And then this is the part that the others are missing. This is why it's an op-ed and not a bill. We can also go towards a flat tax where we lower marginal tax rates, eliminate all these nonsensical deductions, and then have a lower marginal tax rate on the income side to stimulate growth, but make certain that we preserve Social Security. I had a meeting yesterday in Mahoning County, probably 100-ish people, and I asked them, the audience, do you guys think we should keep Social Security? Every single person said absolutely, except for one. There's always one in the crowd who said Social Security is just another welfare program. We got to get rid of it. He was literally chased out of there by the remaining people because, again, look, Bob, you and I know people on Social Security. By the way, it's the people who we meet at many of these events.
I'm 7 years away from qualifying for it, and I am counting on it. It is absolutely going to be necessary to my survival when that time comes.
Right. So imagine I say to you, too bad, Bob. It's insolvent. It's welfare. Should never have been created. A Democrat built it. You go figure out plan B for you, buddy. And if it means that you have to, live in a homeless shelter and eat 2 meals a day instead of 3, too bad. I mean, that's ridiculous. We have to honor and take care of our seniors, and that's what I'm going to do. But look, Bob, I ran for office not because I wanted a political career. I didn't want a fancy title. I wanted to make a dent in the universe, and this means tackling tough things. Part of what's missing in Washington, D.C. is the courage to at least engage in conversation on tough topics. Here's what I would say to all of my critics on this topic. Present a plan. What's your alternative that can actually sustain Social Security, protect seniors from the money that they're counting on for retirement, and that you believe can get passed in the United States Senate? If they present a plan like that to me, I'm all ears, but I'm not going to shy from a conversation. And op-eds are that, Bob. Op-eds are conversations. If you notice very specifically, it's not a bill. But I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. I will never shy away from tough conversations. I'll never shy away from critics. Look,
and I respect and I appreciate that, which is why I texted you, right after this thing came down. I said, whoa, you know where this is going, and let's talk. And so I appreciate you agreeing to come on. And I know you're talking to some other folks about this too. But Senator, what you're talking about, I think, has been very generalized in terms of the need for Social Security. You did give some specifics on the 12.4%, but I need to ask you about what Grover and ATR's specific criticism is here. And this is the math that takes us to 56% combined top rate for Ohio, for example, Ohio small businesses. 37% top federal rate income tax rate.
Hold on. So 37% top rate is not a small business. These are very successful medium and large companies. If you're paying 37% tax rate, that company is doing very, very well. Just to be clear, it's not the mom and shop, the little hairdresser. They like to say small businesses because they know they do polling and they know that's a very sympathetic audience or word track. So it's okay to say a successful business in Ohio. That's fine, but it's not a small business in Ohio.
Okay, fair enough. And I think it may have actually been worded small and mid-sized businesses, but either way. But 37% top federal income tax rate, then the 12.4, as you pointed out, Social Security payroll tax, then the 2.9% Medicare payroll tax, then 0.9% additional Medicare payroll tax, and then, of course, Ohio's 2.75% Ohio state income tax. When you add all that up, the math is 55.95% tax rate for Ohio businesses. So we'll take the word small out of it, but Ohio businesses paying as much as 56%. In New York and California, writes Grover and the ATR, combined tax rates on small and mid-sized businesses, I knew that word was in there, would be increased to 64.1% and 66.5% respectively. So how do you respond to those numbers? 56% in Ohio, 64%, 65%, 66% in other states as well on small and mid-sized businesses as well.
Sure. So let's dissect. There's a lot to dissect there. You know, one of the things that these guys don't realize is that they're talking to somebody who was a business guy my entire life. So who was, by the way, a successful business person. So I don't have to think about who this would have affected. It would have affected me personally. So let's dissect it a few ways. Number one, obviously, we elect Vivek Ramaswamy, we won't have a state income tax. So that should go away, right? And I think all of us are hoping that that happens, and Ohio can make that happen. So
Absolutely.
that's number one. Number two, that's the state level. Number two is what they're missing, because again, they're trying to just put a little bit of nonsense out there, is that small business owners like myself, you don't pay yourself wages. What we're talking about is these are wages that are paid to you. Most of these companies are what's called subchapter S corporations, where you have a small wage that's paid to the owner. So like in my exact example, I paid myself $100,000 a year as a wage. And then the rest of the money that I made in the company was a distribution that's not taxed. Social Security does not tax distributions. Now, does Elizabeth Warren think distributions should be taxed? Yes. Do I think distributions should be taxed? No, because those distributions aren't used to live a fancy life. Those distributions are used to buy a new piece of equipment, a new truck, invest in the next building. So they know this to be true. I don't like it when people go into an argument and say, let's have a serious conversation about trying to fix a topic, and they try to use a lot of propaganda. Look, I'm not an idiot. This affected me. There's no business owner that would pay himself 100% of his profits as wages. That's insane. Again, you pay, then the law allows a certain portion for wages, the rest is distributions. Number three, I want to reduce the marginal rates for income. I think we should go towards a flat tax. Grover, I think, wrote his kindergarten essay on a flat tax, right? I think he did it with a crayon. It just went across like that. I agree with him. I think we should look at a flat tax that massively simplifies our tax code, that something around the order of 20%. So 20%, no matter what, if you make $1 million or $50,000 or $100,000, you pay the same 20%. Now, I also think that if we move to something like that, the first $75,000 of income should be federal tax free. So somebody making 50, 60, 70 grand a year, which is most working Americans, wouldn't pay any income taxes at all. And the way we pay for that, Bob, is let's put some tariffs in permanent code. There's a lot of tariffs that President Trump has put in place, but those will go away if we have a new president. Let's put some of those in code that brings in a certain amount of revenue, eliminate income taxes for the first $75,000 of income for people, then create a flat tax after that of 20%. And then that allows us to shore up Social Security, having everybody pay the exact same amount of money. And the net effect is less taxation. Less taxation. That's what would go into an actual piece of legislation. All I'm doing is let's have a good faith conversation to move this needle forward instead of just be reflectively anti. And Bob, let me just make one final point. Politically, if you were my political advisor, you say, Bernie, don't talk about anything controversial. Just be like the penguin in Madagascar. Just smile and wave. Just go on the easy road. Never take tough votes. Never get into tough conversations. That's the option that I will never take, Bob. Because what we need in politics is people with courage, people who are willing to tackle tough issues. And that's why I think the people of Ohio elected me, to actually get things done that matter.
Senator, I'm not a politician nor a political scientist, but if I were advising you on a political thing, I wouldn't tell you to not take on controversial things and not to have bold ideas. I wouldn't tell you to stay quiet, but I would say, why not just here's an idea that I came up with by Bernie Moreno. When you attach yourself to Elizabeth Warren, now we've got a political problem here. You understand, this is as much of it as anything in the policy or in the suggestion in the op-ed is that you tag teamed with Pocahontas. Why hitch your star to her?
Well, it's not hitching my star to her. What it does is it raises the consciousness of the conversation. If this was something that I did on my own, it would have gotten 2 retweets on X, 2 reposts on X. This is about starting a conversation that we have to tackle, Bob. Look, we have to tackle. Imagine if we could go back way back in a time machine. It would go back to 1993, and if there were Republicans that had the courage to have teamed up with Harry Reid to pass that bill that we just discussed. You know, Joe Biden did block the bill in Judiciary Committee, by the way, ironically. But if Republicans had really spooled up and said, hey, this really matters to us, we wouldn't have seen the disaster that we had under Biden. We wouldn't be talking about any things that we're talking about today. We have to tackle tough issues before they become a crisis. We could talk about this in 2032, by the way. There's plenty of people that will be talking about it in 2032 if we do nothing.
But it's insolvent. It's insolvent by then, right?
Yeah, no, it's not insolvent. You just get about 30% less benefits. And I know a lot of seniors that make it on a razor's edge, Bob. They're living every day on a razor's edge to get by. And in 2032, you cut their benefits 30%, catastrophic.
Yes.
It'll quite literally kill them. And I'm saying, let's have the conversation now. And I'm not afraid to team up with Elizabeth Warren on this issue. I mean, look, obviously, when it comes to creating a bill, it's going to be virtually impossible because what she wants to do is raise all manner of taxes. I laid out what I would want to do. But look, I'll give you an example of something that didn't get media that I also teamed up with her on, which is an institutional investor ban. Once the housing law bill becomes law, which should be in the next few days, giant Wall Street firms can no longer compete with individuals to buy homes. I'm looking at my own neighborhood where I live here.
That's
and
huge.
If I want to buy, somebody wants to buy a house in this neighborhood and they make an offer, these giant Wall Street firms are coming in and paying 10, 15% more and shutting people out of the ability to buy a home. And you talk to somebody who's in their 20s, Bob, you talk to a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old that's still living at home, can't afford to buy a house. They love that bill. And yes, I did team up with Elizabeth Warren on it, but let me just tell you, we won because she wanted to do things way beyond what I wanted. And we were able to get to the point where we started. So the bill that I started, that she tried to move and make it much more towards her liking, we won and we got that bill across the finish line. So look, I'll work with anybody as long as it means that we get the things done that I care about that help working Americans.
I respect that, Senator, obviously, and you should be able to work across the aisle a little bit. Again, the politics of today, though, I mean, Elizabeth Warren, particularly, she's an undeclared socialist. She's no different than Bernie, except he calls himself a socialist, AOC, and so many of the others. So that's a thing here. And to that point, you and she are aligned on this issue and maybe 2 issues. Okay. What about people you should be aligned with? It's my understanding from my friends at AFP, Americans for Prosperity, that Senator Husted, people like Ben Shapiro, who campaigned for you, that these folks are not on board. They don't like this. In fact, they're pointing to the Tax Foundation saying this proposal would cost about 1.3 million jobs and shrink the economy by a full %, or maybe over 1%. This is what some people who are typically allies of yours are saying. So what do you want to say to them?
Well, first of all, look at the Heritage Foundation, and I have the highest heritage score in the entire Ohio delegation. In fact, there's only 4 members of Congress that have a 100% score with the Heritage Foundation. I'm one of those 4, with people like Senator Mike Lee. And again, I would just remind them that this is not a bill. This is not a proposal to do only this. I've laid out what we would do. I would be interested to see what people like Grover and Ben Shapiro, by the way, he's a great friend. I mean, Ben's a great, great friend. That Grover I barely know, but obviously know who he is. So I wouldn't consider him a friend only because I don't know him, but Ben's a great, great guy. If I said, hey, look, we're going to do this Social Security fix, we're also going to create a flat tax at around 20%. We're going to advocate for the elimination of state income taxes. And we're going to massively reduce the size and scale of the federal government by getting rid of race, fraud, and abuse and getting much less government employment. I suspect they would say, well, that's something that we could support. But this is about starting a conversation and quite frankly, drowning out the people in the Republican Party who think that we should eliminate Social Security. Because I think that faction of the Republican Party that says we don't want Social Security, We don't care about working Americans. We want unlimited H-1B visas. We like lots of because it helps us get cheap labor from abroad. We need to drown out the voices in that side of the Republican Party, because those voices in the Republican Party that need to be drowned out are the ones electing these anti-American, anti-hating, anti-Constitution Democrats, because they're the ones going to working Americans and going, look, those guys aren't for you. Those guys don't care about you. They don't care about your life. We have to be that party that President Trump put us on, which is a party that's totally centered and focused on helping grow our middle class, help working Americans achieve the American dream.
Senator Bernie Moreno, I really appreciate you coming on. This is obviously not going to be something that's resolved in a conversation or an interview or 2 or 10. There's a lot of work to be done here on this, but I really appreciate you coming on and giving us, again, if I can ask you, just impose upon you for maybe 1 or 2 more minutes here, just to explain the chart. A few different folks in a conservative chat that we share have asked you about this, and you said, look at the chart. And somebody showed you one chart and you said, no, look at this chart. I put it up there a few moments ago. Let me just put it up there for another 60 or 90 seconds or so and tell us what exactly we need to know about this, okay?
Yeah, so the 6.2% is the amount that you see in your paycheck. So if you're making 50 grand a year, 100 grand a year, all the way up to $184,500 a year, you pay 6.2% of your wages. I don't have to tell you because you see it. Your employer, you might not know, also pays 6.2%. Once you hit $184,500, that goes away. You no longer contribute into the Social Security Trust Fund. So you can see whether now that your percentage of your wages drops dramatically. At $500,000 in income, which again, good for them, they're making good money, they would only be paying 2.3% of their wages into Social Security. Again, your employer piece, not the employee piece. And then at $10 million, which would be obviously a very, very successful person, probably an athlete, somebody like that, you're paying 0.1% of your wages into Social Security. So the $50,000 person is seeing 6.2% of their wages plus 6.2 for their employer. The person who's making $10 million a year is seeing 0.1% of their wages going to Social Security and 0.1 from their employer. I personally don't think that's fair. By eliminating that cap, we can make Social Security solvent as long as it's paired with other reforms, the ones I mentioned, lowering the marginal tax rates, lowering the size and scale of the federal government, making certain that we root out waste, fraud, and abuse, and working to eliminate state income taxes or lowering them massively so that you don't have the situation where ATR is talking about, where you have people paying 55, 56, 65% of their wages. And I think I explained to you, but I'll explain it again. Small businesses that don't employ people, that's a very different group. Small businesses that do employ people, the owner only pays a small portion of their profits as wages. The other parts of the profit of that business goes into dividends, which would not have Social Security tax, because that's the money they use to invest and grow their businesses that allow them to hire more people and to grow our economy.
Senator, I appreciate your time and I appreciate the depth of your explanations on this, and especially the part about the fact this is not a bill. This is not even a proposed piece of legislation. This is a starting point conversation in the op-ed that you had with Senator Warren, and you want to work from there and open up the dialogue with people like Ben and people that you are, you are aligned with, and trying to find a way to save Social Security. And I think most of us would agree that is worth saving. The method of getting there is the issue. So thank you for this.
And have your listeners take a look at Heritage Foundation scores. 4 members of Congress have a 100% score. I'm one of them. There's nobody who's more conservative than the United States Senate than I am.
I think you've been pitching a perfect game, honestly, since you hit the Senate. I really do. But now, suddenly there's a couple of guys getting on base, or at least they're trying to, by way of this, and particularly this op-ed. But I agree with you. I think you've been doing a phenomenal job. I think I've told you that. I've talked about that many times, and your score is well deserved. So hopefully there is something here that can be resolved with like-minded conservatives and people who agree agree. People of goodwill know that our seniors need to be taken care of, and if they've paid into this their whole lives, they deserve to get that money back to protect them, in times when they cannot work anymore. This is a very important thing, and I certainly respect the effort here. Even if there's going to be disagreements on the method, I really, really respect the fact that you're trying to find a solution to save Social Security. So, Senator, thank you for that.
Thank you, Bob. Have a great weekend. Have a great 4th.
Thank you, and happy 250th birthday to this country. I know you're gonna celebrate as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, there you go. That's Senator Bernie Moreno, and there's a lot there. Obviously, I'm probably going to end up having to make this a separate episode of the show because of the amount of time we spent on birthright citizenship. He was all over that too, and then of course responding to some of the criticisms of his partnership, or at least his alliance, long enough to write an op-ed together to say, let's save Social Security with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Like I said, I could take maybe a different name that he would partner with here and be happier with this than I am with Elizabeth Warren. I think there is a political problem with that, but there it is. All right, let me bring in now, as promised, our good friend and the State Director of Americans for Prosperity, Ohio. Let's welcome Donovan O'Neil back to our program. Donovan, good morning.
Bob, always good to be with you. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's always good to have you. So obviously you and I have been talking a little bit privately about what's going on here. You actually sent me, I think, Grover and Americans for Tax Reform's response to Senator Moreno and Elizabeth Warren's. Again, he's even saying it's not even a proposal. It's a discussion point. This is something that we need to think about doing in order to save Social Security. So why don't you give me your primary analysis of what we have just seen and what you just heard from Senator Moreno?
Yeah, look, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on here and appreciate a lot of the work that Senator Moreno's been doing in his time in Washington. I think, we Ohioans sent him there, right, as he said, right, touch the third rail to tackle the issues, to make a dent in the universe. Agree 100% there. The challenge, right, the problem, just to put a fine point on it, is the dent in the universe, right, is that he's attempting to make here with this op-ed, which I get, and I think folks are like Grover and Stephen Moore and others are smart guys and understand this, as do your viewers and listeners. But the problem here is you're taking an idea and you're providing validity and moving the Overton window towards a tax increase being the solution to a problem, when even the own advocates of this tax increase, Bernie Moreno, Elizabeth Warren, understand and recognize and acknowledge it only solves the problem, if you will, for the next 20 or 30 years. And so we're not actually even solving the problem with this conversation. All we're doing is kicking the can down the road for the next generation, so that my kids, right, your grandkids, Bob, have to deal with this problem. And I think if you want to make a dent in the universe, if you want to, go and shake up the status quo and break the decades of DC dysfunction, there's a lot better ways to do that than partnering with the second most progressive member of the Senate to put forward a op-ed that only proposes as the solution in writing a $3 trillion tax increase.
Yeah. Again, I don't think the partnership is necessarily a great look here from an optics standpoint. She is, and he even agreed, she's an undeclared socialist. Bernie and AOC and several others declare she does not, but she pretty much governs that way, and she votes that way. You, Donovan, and I mentioned to Bernie this, or Senator Moreno, to be more formal, this estimate by the Tax Foundation, talking about this costing 1.3 million jobs and shrinking the economy by over 1%. If this, and I think it's really crucial here to be fair to the senator, that's why I brought it up to him. If this was a proposed piece of legislation, the numbers that we're talking about right now and that I'm asking you about could be the result. He's saying this is not a standalone piece of legislation. It's not even a proposal. It is a framework of a conversation that has to happen about what we do about Social Security. It would need to be paired with a whole bunch of other things, including reduction of the top federal tax rate and so on and so forth. He pushed toward a flat tax and things of that nature as well. So I want to be fair when we discuss this, but the op-ed itself and the framework here, you said, and pointed out that the Tax Foundation said it would cost 1.3 million jobs and shrink the economy. So take it from that vantage point, Donovan, and tell me what your argument is.
Yeah, and I understand the difference between an op-ed and a piece of legislation. The problem is, we've got a Republican senator from a red state advocating alongside a progressive senator from a blue state for an absolute tax increase, with none of those other concessions included. And so, what you're effectively doing here, right? The proposal on the table is 1.2 million jobs lost, $3 trillion in new government revenue to bolster a broken program 100 years in for another 20 years. Again, I think part of this is, right, like, if we want to go make that dent in the universe, if we want to go reform a system that, quite frankly, our organization has been talking about for decades. I actually, one of the toughest jobs, Bob, was actually going out and organizing kids on college campuses to care about a thing called Social Security. I did it for a while. It's not easy. Most of them don't care about what their lives are going to be like 40 years from now. But we went out and had those conversations and tried to drive that. So agree that this is a problem, agree that we need to be touching the third rail, agree that we need to be engaging in the conversation. I think the flaw here, right, is that the proposal on the table, right, the starting point for a conversation is $3 trillion in tax increase, not how do we empower the next generation of retirees, right, to be in control of their finances. How do we reform congressional budgeting so that we don't raid these funds into the future? How do we make sure that we can meet the promises to, folks like you and others, right, Bob, who are on the cusp of retirement, have been paying into a system for 35, 40 years and expecting, to have that promise met by the taxpayer.
Exactly.
But the starting salvo, right, the opening argument is a conservative senator and a progressive senator arguing for a tax increase. That's where we start. So we have to, groups like ours, folks who want to reform the system and make sure that if it's a program that the government's going to continue to do, that it actually works, not just for the next 20 years, but for the next 250 years. We've got to start from a place of pushing back against legitimization of a $3 trillion tax increase. And you can talk about doing all of those other things, which are great, but I don't see Elizabeth Warren conceding those points to Senator Moreno here. Not a spot of that was in the op-ed. And I think had there been a little bit of give and take, that conversation's a bit different. But that's not what we have. What we have on the table is a $3 trillion tax increase.
I think what you just said is a really important point, Donovan. There wasn't a whole lot of give and take and back and forth on this. And I think that was because they were saying, here are the things that we are unified on, or things that we have a common ground on. But the discussion, the debate, the piecing together something that might be a proposal that could lead to a bill and be a piece of legislation, I think that back and forth is going to happen. And I think there are going to be a whole lot of things that would have to change, excuse me, about this before it could be started. Donovan, I put this chart up when I was talking to the senator a few minutes ago. I'm going to put it up for you too, because when you talk about this massive tax increase, what they're talking about, of course, it's for people who aren't really paying their tax, or at least on the same level that somebody making $50,000 would. So this is, calling Social Security contributions regressive. Higher earners pay a much smaller percentage of their wages, according to the 2026 data. So as you can see here, $10 million earners paying, effectively only a 0.1% effective rate. Do you see that as being something that needs to be fixed? Because we're calling it, which it is, a tax increase on people who are making more money or whose businesses are making more money like that. Do you see a need to raise the taxes on those individuals just in the interest of fairness for those who are making much less?
I mean, fairness is the argument that the Democrats use every election cycle to argue for increasing taxes on the wealthy, right? To help subsidize the programs to support the poor. And they do it.
Pay your fair share, which is what they scream. You're right. Every single election cycle. That's very true.
What that graph shows, right, is actually is making the argument for this program now transforming into a wealth transfer from a social insurance program, right? What they fail to mention when they show that graph is that the amount of benefit that somebody at that higher end receives is significantly lower than somebody at a lower income level, right? So if your average income is $45,000 a year, you're getting more out of the Social Security insurance system than you are somebody who's, 35 years we're making $250,000. So yes, the amount you pay in is capped, but also the amount of benefit you get out is capped. Now, I would not necessarily argue for even increasing the amount of benefit you get out being raised, because again, I think the idea here is this is a program designed to support low-income individuals and provide dignity in retirement. But the problem with this program, right, is fundamentally demographics. It's the fact that when this program was enacted, we had, I think 16, 17 people per every retiree. We had shorter lifespans. That's changed. We have 2.5 or so people working for every retiree. We have people living longer. And I want to be clear, that's not a bad thing. The advances in medicine, the longevity, the ability for people to live longer and enjoy more years on this great earth is a good thing. But what that requires, right, is a change in the way we think about a program like this. Again, rather than paying it into the black hole that is DC and putting another $3 trillion into that broken system to buy another 20 years of a program, what about starting to reform the program towards a way to empower patients, right? Empower individuals, right? Just like we do with health savings accounts. That's why I was thinking of patients, Bob. Health savings accounts,
I knew where you were going
where we
with that.
empower people. Education savings accounts, right? Where we empower families, not government funded schools, or even the Trump accounts, which I just got my kids finalized and their enrollment in yesterday, believe it or not, right? That empower and put an investment in our future generations. I think that's where we should be starting the conversation with op-eds, and that's what should be the opening salvo. And if we can get Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or somebody, right, from the left to agree to that with the good Senator Moreno, I think that's a place where we're applauding, right? That's a place where you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, this is a proposal that actually is going to give a little and take a little and ultimately result in a better, more sustainable program. If we're empowering Americans to make these choices rather than the continued failed policies of government bureaucrats for the last 100 years, now we're on to something.
Donovan, the senator spoke of a flat tax. He loves the idea of a 20% flat tax, something that Grover has been pushing for a very long time, as the senator pointed out as well. Where are you, and you can speak personally or for AFP, I don't know, but where are you in regards to that?
We've been the largest advocates for the tax reforms, the 2017 Trump tax cuts. We worked tirelessly to help push those over the finish line through our grassroots efforts. We flagged the fiscal cliff that was the expiration of the 2017 Trump tax cuts because, Washington didn't want to let that money go forever. So they set them to expire. We flagged that 2 years out from 2025 when they were set to expire. And we're proud to have fought hard to get those enacted through the working family tax cuts, which Senator Moreno supported, and we appreciate his vote there.
And made permanent just last year. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. People are reaping those benefits today from that act. So moving in that direction is absolutely a good thing. And something, again, let's get Elizabeth Warren, let's get these progressive liberals who've gone off the deep end to begin to concede those points to us rather than us conceding tax increases that go far beyond what Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, even Bernie Sanders have said on the presidential trail, and start actually working to fix the programs in substantial ways rather than just try to shore them up for a couple decades.
Yeah. And I don't like the idea of kicking things down the road either. I don't think any of us do. We have all, in fact, railed against that. But there comes a point where there's like a personal, where it's affecting not just policy or, the bigger picture, but it's a personal thing. And as I said to Bernie, I'm 7 years away from Social Security. I don't know how much longer I'm going to work. I don't know how much longer. And not to mention, by the way, I'm hit by this too, because I'm self-employed. As a self-employed person, I'm going to have to pay that entire payroll tax, the whole 12.4%, not half of it, all of it is going to come from me. I don't like that idea. But I also don't like the idea of 7 years from now, I'm 65 and I get a chance to start collecting on that which I've paid into for all of these years if it's not there for me, because it's going to become insolvent in 6, which is just happens to be the way that it is. We're looking at 2032. So there comes a point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of millions of other, seniors at that point. Because I will be one of them, and I don't want what I've paid for my entire life to not be there for me. I'm counting on that literally for my ability to live, beyond retirement. And so you understand what I'm saying. There is a need for immediacy. We have to find something to help people who are on the cusp of retirement right now. And if it gives us another 20 or 30 years of funding this, to figure out the long-term projection, yeah, it is a kicking down the road, which I am fundamentally opposed to. But I'm like, for me, it's like me and millions of others like me, kick it and fix it over the course of the next 20 or 30 years so that my kids, when they retire, they're going to have what is what is necessary for them. Does that make any sense?
No, it totally does. And I think, that's the fundamental aspect here, right? As we, it's going to sound blunt and crass, but we're all trying to get ours, right? And that's the problem, though, right? Is Washington, since the 1930s, since the New Deal era, right? Not to put too much history and background into this, but like since the New Deal era, got the bend of government, the tilt has been towards taking from those who have and giving to those who may not, right? Or growing government, empowering government solutions rather than individual solutions. And so at some point, right, we need a generation that's willing to say enough is enough. And maybe it's not this generation, right? Maybe this generation in Washington, D.C. continues the trend of the last 70 years. But the reality is we need I think the real courage comes not from offering tax increases and the same solutions that have been out there for decades, but rather bold new solutions that create a better New Deal for the American people. And, I think it's politically popular to increase, to shore up a program like Social Security. It's politically popular to say I'm going to take from somebody who's making $250,000 to support, somebody who's, made $40,000 most of their life. But the reality is just because it's politically popular doesn't mean it's actually the right and moral thing to do, let alone the actual solution to the future of our nation, right? And these are fundamentally socialist ideas, right? These ideas of Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all these programs, right? Start touching all those third rails, right? They are fundamentally socialist in nature, and they are creating the debt crisis that our nation has. $39 trillion in debt. On what, $5.5 trillion in tax revenue, about $3 trillion more, $3 to $4 trillion more than we had when, Bush and Al Gore were talking about this issue in the 2000 presidential election. And I think, again, the areas of agreement, left, right, and middle are, we need to make sure we're protecting our senior citizens. We need to make sure we're meeting the obligations to the people who have come before us, right, who have paid into this system. But what the real third rail here, right, is how do you, coming up with the solutions to balance that with transforming the program in a way that's going to make sure that the next generation has a better deal than the one we were given in the 1930s.
Yeah, that has to happen. I agree with that. I would push back. I don't like the characterization of Social Security and Medicare as being socialist in nature. I don't like that language, because I think there are things, and also the part about $39 trillion in debt. Good Lord, it's not because we're taking care of our seniors. It is because we have a spending problem on things that have absolutely nothing to do with our people, particularly what DOJ was able to figure out. They found out how much fraud there was, how much waste, how much abuse there was. Clawing it back is another story. Stopping the spending going forward is another story. We spend so much money, we are defrauded by so much money. I mean, again, I think they've talked about it. If we clawed back everything that was just being taken away from us in fraud, we would not only literally erase the deficit, we'd pay a good chunk of that $39 trillion national debt down. So it's a spending thing for me, much more than it is, taking care of some of these very important things. But I see Social Security and the ability for people to retire and to be able to live and not have to work to the grave. I see that as just as fundamental as our tax dollars going to pay for our military. It's our tax dollars going to pay for our police and our fire, where there are in for our roads. There are services, essential services, obviously, that we have to be willing to pay taxes for in order to function as a society. And I think those are some of them, in addition to when we all eventually, until God, wonder, I want, they, I don't want to go too far off into this, but nobody's going to live forever. We're not, as much as we want to stay young forever, and we're 22, we're not thinking about Social Security, and we're not thinking about retirement because it's a lifetime away. But we're all going to be there, and we're all not going to be able to work to the grave. We're all going to need to be able to live off of some protection. And until we find a better plan, and I know you guys, my partners and friends at AFP are working toward that, whether it's an HSA like the health savings accounts or something of that nature. Until something like that comes to fruition, we've got to be willing to fund our military, and we've got to be able to fund our roads, fund our police, fund our fire. And yeah, we've got to be able to fund our seniors, because we're all going to be those seniors at some point, and we're all going to need that. So I'll give you the last word, Donovan.
No, I appreciate that. Well, and I think just to that point, right, in terms of the solutions, as I've heard Bernie say, Senator Moreno say on your show and other places in the last week since his op-ed dropped, where are my, look to my friends on the right to bring me their solutions, and I'm happy to entertain them. My question is, why not, why go directly to the second most progressive senator in Congress and pen an op-ed?
That's my first question to him. Why her? That was my very first question.
$3 trillion tax increase, then calling, Grover Norquist, Americans for Prosperity, Taxpayer Union, heck, even call Stephen Moore, right? Renowned economist, Trump economic advisor, works at the American First Policy Institute, who's listed in there as blasting this idea. Why not call those folks, right, and say, hey, what is the conservative solution? What is the way we make a dent in the universe on Social Security? And that's the head scratcher for me. I do appreciate Senator Moreno. He is accessible to us. Our team has called his office many times, and they always answer. They always respond. And so we appreciate that. But at the same time, he sought out Elizabeth Warren as the partner for a conversation on Social Security tax increases, not those on the right who have the solutions and are eager to have a champion fight to advocate for them.
It's a very, very fair criticism. And that's literally was the first thing I said to him. I said, why Elizabeth Warren? Of all people, if you want to partner with somebody, we can do better than an undeclared socialist, which is what she is. So I completely agree. Donovan, want to thank you. Great analysis. Appreciate it every step of the way. Appreciate everything AFP does, especially AFP Ohio. People don't know this, but you and I did kind of a postscript, if you will, to last Monday's event on the 22nd in Columbus, and it didn't air because there was a camera audio malfunction and it was so unlistenable I couldn't even put it on. So I apologized to you privately for that. I want to apologize to AFP for that as well, because it was a damn good conversation about a damn good event that we held, celebrating one small step and the contributions that we have as Ohioans have made to America 250. So Donovan, I know it's already 5 minutes past our time here, but give me a couple of minutes and just recap from that people did not hear from you, unfortunately, due to my tech problems here. Can you just give us
no worries? It was the deep state and the communists conspiring against freedom and celebrating America, and they won this time, Bob. But we won't let them. Win again. Yeah, and I appreciate you being there. And you brought a bus. Shout out to all those folks who came down with you from Strongsville on the bus and joined us in Columbus for the celebration. We had about 350 patriots, joining to celebrate America. And we put the politics aside, we put the policy aside even. What we really focused on, and you set the stage for this, Bob, in particular, set the stage on the last 250 years and how we got to where we are today and what it's going to take to make sure we have another 250 years of American greatness and freedom. And, it wasn't necessarily by design. It worked out this way. And I think ultimately it was good. The stage, when we first had the idea for the event and had the opportunity to do it, our instant gut reaction was, let's pack that stage with as many politicians and elected officials as we can to do what they do best. But as the program came together and it began to come into focus of what we're really trying to deliver with this one small step message, the program ultimately was ordinary people who have taken one small step to do extraordinary things. Not to say you're ordinary, Bob, far and above, but right, you know, this wasn't about.
I strive for ordinary. I strive to be ordinary. I'm not there yet.
It wasn't politicians patting themselves on the back. It wasn't long, you know, grandiose political speeches in the vein of our founding fathers. Although Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd were there and in the audience that evening, it was ordinary Americans, ordinary Ohioans who have gone on to do extraordinary things. And ultimately, I think, is, you know, based on the feedback we've received on the event from our different activists and partners who were in the audience there, first-time visitors too, who've emailed us and said, "How do I get more involved? This was awesome," has been, you know, an inspiration and a reminder that this country wasn't built by, which I think you talked about, right? It wasn't built by people who knew they would be, you know, mythical figures of history. It was built by ordinary guys and gals who just had a vision for a better country, a different way of doing things, and accomplished it. And that is available to all of us here in this great nation.
Amen. That's exactly what it was all about. Donovan, it was an honor to be a part of that, and I always appreciate the chance to speak with you. Thanks for hanging in a little longer this morning. I know we came a little late because we were talking to the senator, but we have a lot of important discussion points that I think we've touched off here, and obviously we'll build on going forward. Thank you, my friend.
It was fun. Thanks, Bob.
You got it, sir. There you go. That's Donovan O'Neil, State Director of AFP-Ohio. He does a phenomenal job with that organization. Here's what I'm going to do, because I'm late. I got to get out. I'm going to post the Moreno interview that I just did. If you missed it, I'm going to post it in the locals community page. And I want to start a discussion there because I don't have time to look at the chat right now. I want to have a commentary discussion there of the Bernie Moreno plan, if you will. It's not a proposal yet. It's not a policy. It's not a bill, but the discussion point, the framework of the idea of saving Social Security. I want to have this conversation with you as you listen. And so what we're going to do is I'll put it in locals. If you're not a member of locals yet, if you're watching on Rumble right now, click the button there that says join. That'll put you into our locals page. And if you are so inclined to be a paid supporter, by the way, we'll give you some extra access. But I'm going to make this particular one open up to everybody. I'll post the interview, watch it in case you missed it, and then tell me what you think about the idea that Senator Moreno has come up with here with respect to solving the Social Security dilemma, hopefully without taxing people into oblivion. That's the idea here. All right. So we'll put that up there tomorrow, Dr. Piper, and we're probably going to have to talk more about the birthright citizenship decision as well. So we'll have that on tomorrow's show. Thanks to everybody, Dylan behind the scenes, all my chatters, to my guests. We had three great guests, Andrew Arthur from CIS, obviously Senator Moreno, and obviously Donovan O'Neil. Thanks to them as well. Thanks to you. Be well, be safe, stay free. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.